back to the beginning. Planning an OBS towing build, really planning any 7.3 build, but specifically we're going to talk about OBS trucks for now. And the important thing here is that we need to know what you want to use the truck for. And then we need to choose injectors and a turbo that match that. And I would honestly say that probably more important than injectors is choosing a turbo that's going to fit within an RPM band that you need the truck to perform well in. And so the larger you go with injectors and the larger you go with a turbo, I should say the larger you go with injectors will require you to run a larger turbo. And of course that means a lot of things. There's a lot of components in a turbo, but the larger turbo you have to run, and then the narrower the window is going to be for you to make power. And so, like, let's say you want something that's going to be around like 300 horsepower. We'll choose a 300, 350 horsepower, somewhere in there. We'll choose a modest turbo that's going to have like a usable power range from say 1800 RPM to around 2800 RPM, somewhere in there. It's a pretty broad window for a 7.3. The problem with going larger is, say you want a 500 horsepower build. And this is one of the questions we get asked a lot is people want to build a 500 horsepower 7.3 and still tow with it. And my argument against that, one of them is, aside from just reliability, is that you're going to deal with efficiency issues on a 7.3, like around 3,000 RPM. Like they just don't make power that high. And if you run a larger setup, you run a turbo that's capable of making 500 horsepower, then it's going to be even laggier, and it's going to be kind of useless anything below like 2,200 RPM, 2,200 RPM. And, sure, that gives you a lot more power for like an 800 RPM window, but that's really not that useful outside of the potential catastrophic failures you could have if you could make that much power and keep it cool. And so, one of the biggest issues you're going to fight is temperatures, specifically exhaust temperatures. And so it's good to have your build planned around, again, what do you need the truck to do good for you? Because especially with the 7.3, without a VGT turbo, with a 4-speed transmission, like we're very limited on what we're going to be capable of doing with these trucks. And so what I want to do in this podcast / video is I want to go through choosing the parts that we would want to use for the kind of build that you want the truck to be useful with, or the kind of thing you want the truck to be good at. And that is like daily driving, responsive, towing, and reliable, like diagnosable and usable with the widest power range we can have. And it sounds like the audio is still good, so hopefully we're just going to be able to roll with this. So I'm going to jump over to our website here and start kind of running through the parts that we would want to go with. Now, I've already mentioned that we're probably going to shoot for like the 300 to 350 horsepower-ish range of usable power. And that's about what we're going to see anyway. We're going to see really for a reasonable price, about the most amount of money that we can make, or most amount of power that we can make is around 300, 350 horsepower that's actually going to be usable, where you could put your foot to the floor and work the truck in most scenarios as long as you have the proper supporting modifications. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to be injectors, and then we're going to look at turbo. If I need to, I can blow this up more, just let me know. So I'm going to jump onto the OBS trucks, and then fuel system and HPOP, and fuel injectors. And we're going to take a look at stage 1 injectors. Now, I've said this many, many times in other podcasts, but stage 1 injectors are really about as good as it gets on an OBS if you want reliability, serviceability, and repairability, and the ability to diagnose the truck. With stage 1s, so a 160-0 injector, we're going to be capable of running the truck in a stock tune, and it will run exactly like stock. I'm just going to search for it here. There we go. Having the ability to run the truck like totally stock is really nice if you have a runnability problem. Like if you have idle issues or you feel like you have a miss or something like that, it can be harder to diagnose a truck with a chip in it whether the chip is the issue, you have a connection problem, or just the fact that now the truck is tuned and is not doing what it should have done from the factory. And a lot of shops don't know how to work on modified trucks. Now, 160s, being that they're the same injection ratio and the same nozzle size, or 7-to-1 injection ratio, as the stock AA code injectors, means that they will run just like stock if you leave like ICP and pulse width like stock. So this is what I'd recommend. It'd be a unlimited diesel or rosewood diesel, and there's other brands too. We really recommend unlimited diesel, stage 1, 160 injectors. You could, for the same kind of build, use like a 160/30 or a 180/30, so what typically people would refer to as a stage 1.5. The reason I say that's maybe not worth it on an OBS is that the only time that a 30% nozzle is going to be of much benefit versus a stock nozzle in this scenario is at high RPM, basically wide open throttle in a race tune. Outside of that scenario, like that's your biggest window. And as you come away from high RPM, like high pulse width, so in a race tune, and like lower in the pedal, like as you come down from that, the gap starts to narrow on why that nozzle would be useful. Like there's plenty of time to get the fuel in the cylinders to make use of it with a stock nozzle. And so there's nothing wrong with running a 30% nozzle. There's just not a ton of benefit, except in that scenario, they'll make, another like 40 horsepower, 30, 40 horsepower more than a stock nozzle will. And unless that's the scenario you're trying to make the most amount of power, it may not be worth going for more than that. So stage 1 injectors, I said I like unlimited diesel. One of the things we do is we offer free tuning for the injectors if you buy the injectors from us. But this is across the board, whoever you order from, doesn't matter. It's just easy enough for me to look at it on our website here. I do recommend using a PHP Hydra for tuning. They are the most versatile chip that you can get. Basically, everyone who writes tuning for a 7.3 writes tuning for a PHP Hydra, like every tuning company that writes tuning for 7.3. You can load the tunes on the chip yourself, so you can choose who you want to buy them from, and then they can be emailed to you, and you can load them on the chip yourself. You don't have to send the chip off to be burned like you do with basically every other 7.3 chip. Now, I see a lot of people asking, like, well, can I use my DP tuner? And the answer to that is you technically could. The DP tuners are, I don't remember, F6 or whatever, I think is their newest one. Like we would need to send the files to DP to be converted. I don't remember what the file type is or what his size is that their chip uses. They would need to be sent to him to be converted. Nobody's going to do that. So the most like widely available tuning you can get is for a PHP Hydra, and you can flash it yourself, including if there's tune revisions that need to be made. It's an email away rather than sending the chip off away. And they're like $350. It's a great price as of 2022. Cord charge part doesn't really matter for this. So $1,200, we picked injectors. The next thing is going to be the turbo. And frequently what we used to see with OBS trucks and what we used to recommend was really anything like a stage 1.5 injector and above. It starts to make a lot of sense to go to a T4 turbo instead of a drop-in turbo. So a turbo that just drops in place of the stock one. And that was mainly because of the price. If you look at, let's do this, Banks OBS intercooler kits. You're going to spend like $1,700 to $1,800 on an intercooler kit. You're going to spend, if you go with the drop-in turbo in this case, like a KC Stage 1 turbo, which is, we'll talk about that in a minute, you're going to spend about like $1,190. You're going to spend about $300 to $500 on up pipes, and then another like $100 to $200 on a pedestal. And if you go that route, then it used to be around like $3,200 or so, like as of like a year or two ago. It used to be around $3,500 or so to get a T4 kit. You got up pipes, you got a down pipe, you got intercooler piping, a spider, plenums, boots and clamps, like basically everything you need from the down pipe all the way to an intercooler. And it did cost a little bit more than doing it this way with a with a intercooler kit and a drop-in turbo and all that. Well, now it's quite a lot more. Like it's like about $800 more to do a T4 kit instead of a drop-in. In this power range that we're talking, like a tow rig where we want a wide band of usable power, KC turbos are fantastic. They're like, you're not going to get like a lot better performance or more usable power or better EGT control by going to a T4 kit with like an S363 or an S364.5. It's going to be very similar. So price-wise, in this category, you're probably not better off going with a T4 kit. All right, so next up is going to be the turbo. We'll jump over to OBSs, and then we'll go to turbos and drop-in turbos. So KC stage 1. Now, this is another thing we see a lot. We have guys that'll look at doing we'll recommend doing a KC stage 1 turbo, and they say, well, why don't I do a KC stage 2? It's like, I think it's like $20 or $40 more than a stage 1 is. And the reason is, like I mentioned earlier, the larger the turbo you go with, the less of a power window you're going to have. And with a KC stage 2, it has a larger turbine wheel, and far as we've seen, the data we've seen, the larger turbine wheel, the 63 millimeter turbine wheel instead of a 73 millimeter turbine wheel versus a 70 millimeter turbine wheel on the stage 1, the KC stage 2 is going to be better in that wide open throttle, high RPM, in a race tune scenario. But if your goal is a towing rig or something that's going to be reliable, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time there. So if you genuinely were going to spend a lot of time in that scenario, then maybe the larger turbine will make sense because it'll help you manage back pressure and exhaust temperatures in that scenario. But a smaller turbo that's going to be more efficient at a lower RPM and a lower load is going to be able to manage EGTs better in those scenarios. That's just sort of a generalization, but nonetheless, I recommend a KC stage 1 turbo, not the stage 2. You are going to have to figure out what boot you have, what boot option you'll need. You're either going to have like a metal, like a pot metal, like a aluminum intake tube into a boot into your turbo. I think I thought we had a picture of it, but I guess I don't. It's probably somewhere else. Anyway, or you'll have like one plastic intake tube that runs from your turbo all the way up to like right above your valve cover. If it's two pieces between your turbo and your valve cover, then you're going to want to select the 3.5-inch metal intake tube. If it's one solid plastic piece between the turbo and over your valve cover, it's going to be the 4-inch intake tube. We'll add that. All right, the next thing is going to be fuel system. And this isn't in any particular order other than you're not going to be able to make use of even a stage 1 injector without a fuel system. The stock fuel system, if it's perfectly healthy, is going to be capable of working well, like maintaining fuel pressure, maybe up to like 250 horsepower to the ground. So it's fine for the stock injectors, but we're going to be capable of making, mid 300s to high 300s on even an AC Coda stage 1 injector. So you're going to need an electric fuel system. There are a ton of options for these. The ones I would look at are going to be 444 fab, driven diesel, or irate diesel. Now, the most common ones that we sell are going to be irate diesel, and I'm going to use them as an example here, but I would look at the other options out there. They're really, any of them are going to be good. So fuel system kits. There we go. irate diesel has two different fuel system kits, and the main difference between them is going to be that they have their complete OBS fuel system, and then they have their competition OBS fuel system. The biggest difference is that the lower priced one, the complete kit, is going to work from a selector valve forward, so you retain both tanks, and it uses a Walbro fuel pump, which is plenty of fuel pump for this kind of power. Really anything up to around 500 or more, 550, so like a 250, 100 injector. But the problem that we've seen, I like their kits. I really do like their kits a lot. The problem we've seen is the Walbro pumps are not that reliable, especially if you work from the selector valve forward. So you have a couple options. You can build your own system using like a marine selector valve instead, something that's going to flow better than the stock one. That's one option, or just run one tank. And I can't go too much into depth on that, but if you do some research, there's tons of options for running like a Bronco tank or something like that. It is nice to retain both tanks and just hook up to it. But a lot of the failures we see from Walbro pumps or any pump is because of restriction issues in the selector valve, which if it was functioning perfectly, they probably wouldn't have that issue, but they don't function perfectly with several 100,000 miles on them. So for the purpose of this, we're going to choose the IRA Diesel Complete fuel system, keeping in mind that that isn't the best pump you can choose. If you go this route and the pump fails, one, they are cheap, which isn't a good excuse, and two, you can change that to something else if you want to. You can put a different pump on it, but overall, these kits are really nice because it keeps the filters mounted high on the frame rail. You're not going to be hanging down. I like the stainless hard lines, and it is a complete kit. So we'll add that. Actually, did I forget to add the hydro with the injectors? I think I'm going to do it this way. I do want the hydro with the injectors. And let's get the core charge. All right, let me go edit the cart real quick. And delete that one. Also, guys, if you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I will get to them later. All right, so if we want to talk about what things should be done together, it doesn't really matter. What I usually recommend is if you have a problem with your truck, you have injector issues or you have a fuel system issue or you have a turbo issue, address that first. If we're doing a build like this, it's not really going to matter. The only things I would say are you would want to do your tuning and injectors together, at least if you're getting them from us, because we'll include the tuning for free when you get injectors, which saves you about $300. And you can run an AC code, so 160 on a stock OBS just fine. You just won't be able to use the full capacity of the injector unless you have the other supporting modifications. The other things I would do together are I would do the fuel system and the turbo together. Just because the turbo's kind of a pain to pull on OBS trucks, and you have to take the turbo out to do the fuel system, to install a fuel system. So the turbo and fuel system I would do together. Injectors and tuning, I would do that together. But all of it does not have to be done together. Next up, also with the turbo, I'll say this. You are going to want to get a blank turbo pedestal. And I would recommend anyway getting rid of the exhaust back pressure valve. The exhaust back pressure valve is the outlet on the turbo that mostly was just used to put load on the engine. It would close when it's cold, on a cold start, to put load on the engine to help the truck warm up faster, which is useful, except they're also a really common place for the valve to get stuck, or for the rod that actuates the valve that's in the pedestal, the rod actuates out of the pedestal via oil. It's a really common place for an oil leak. So if you're going to be going into this, I would recommend getting a blank turbo pedestal so you don't end up with oil leaks or the valve sticking. Usually the two components you would want are going to be a high flow outlet on the turbo, which is the outlet on the turbo without the valve in it, and a blank pedestal that doesn't have the rod that actuates the valve. If you get a KC turbo, it comes with a high flow outlet already on it, so you don't need to purchase a high flow outlet, but you will want to get a blank turbo pedestal. Sadly, I don't have any blank turbo pedestals. The only ones we used to sell were the Garrett parts, and we haven't been able to get those in 2 years. And I know that you can get them on Amazon or eBay or whatever. And more than likely, if you find them, they're probably mostly from the same manufacturer, no matter who's branding them. So I couldn't make a recommendation on which ones are good or bad, but I know a lot of people buy them on Amazon or whatever, and they seem to work fine. We also want to do up pipes. So we can go back into OBS trucks, and then turbo parts and rebuild kits. And from us, we offer diesel side up pipes. There are other options out there, but mainly you want to get a set of good quality stainless bellowed up pipes. And the reason for bellowed up pipes is the factory ones will leak in a couple places, but where the pipe from the factory goes into the collector, there's a donut gasket that wears through the pipe itself. Switching to bellows, you end up bolting the pipe on both ends to your manifold and then onto the collector. And then there's an expansion bellow. So when the truck is heating up and cooling down and the pipes expand and contract, rather than using a gasket that wears on the steel on the pipe itself, it uses a bellow that will expand and contract. So in this case, we're going to use diesel site bellowed up pipes. I've been pretty happy with them. They work really well. And as you can see, it gets expensive pretty fast. All right, let me check something real quick. Okay. Next up is going to be the high pressure oil pump. The stock high pressure oil pump, the 15-degree pump on OBS trucks, is not going to be capable of keeping up with really any injector larger than stock. Typically, what I recommend is going through like getting the injectors replaced in your truck, because it is possible that the injectors in your truck can be leaking, and that can cause ICP issues if you had them. But this is more of something we can do on Super Duties. On an OBS, I would probably go ahead and just replace the injectors, test them under like the hottest tune you intend to run, like as much power as you intend to make, and make sure that the truck is capable of maintaining like 2,800 to 3,000 PSI of injection pressure. If it's not, then it's time to replace the high pressure oil pump, and more than likely you will need to. So we'll go back under the OBS trucks, fuel system, and HPOP, and then we'll go to HPOP and related, high pressure oil pump and related. Now there's several different pumps out there. You'll see like Bosch stock replacement pumps. CNC Fabrication has their stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is like a stock replacement for like a Super Duty. It's a 17-degree pump. And then their stage 2 is a 20-degree swash plate pump. The other option you'll see is going to be like the T500 pumps, the Terminator Engineering pumps, and Diesel Site adrenaline pumps. Diesel Site's adrenaline pump is a fantastic pump. They're great. The only issue that I have with them is that there are other options like CNCs that are quite a lot cheaper and are also fantastic. They both have stainless inserts. You can't see them in the picture because they have plugs in them, but they have stainless inserts, and so they're not going to strip when you install your lines, which is pretty common. And the CNC Stage 1, which is the 17-degree pump, will keep up great with a Stage 1 injector. Like we've seen it many, many, many times. It should be perfectly fine with these injectors, and they're a good price. When you replace the high pressure oil pump, is not a bad idea, whether it's a OBS or a Super Duty, to replace the lines with I really like CNC Fabrication's stainless braided lines. They're a great way to go. So I'm going to go ahead and assume we want to add this. And the other important thing is making sure that your truck is like an early 95, 94.5, or a 96 to 03. If you guys have questions about figuring out which one it is, you can always give us a call and we can help you figure that out. Let's assume it's a late, and I'm going to skip the lines for now. We'll add that to the cart. And let's talk about transmission. Very commonly, people are going to want to put a accumulator body in their truck or a modified torque converter. One really common failure on E4OD transmissions is the torque converter. It certainly is a failure point. And it's hard to give a general answer to a question of, should I upgrade my transmission, like components on the transmission, like upgrade the converter or stick an accumulator body in it, or should I upgrade the transmission completely? The best general answer I can give to what you should do to the E4OD is, if it has a lot of miles on it, especially if you like drop the pan and there's a lot of material in the pan, I wouldn't bother, especially if you're paying a shop to do the work. I would not bother paying a shop to remove the transmission to stick a torque converter in it if you have a lot of miles on it. either way, your transmission is going to fail someday. And it's a pretty big expense to stick a modified converter in the transmission, like a billet front cover converter, like a decent converter in it. Pay for the labor to do that, and then have your transmission fail and have to do it all over again. Now, if your transmission fails, it doesn't necessarily mean that your new converter you just installed is going to be ruined, but it should be like at least cut and cleaned to make sure there's nothing wrong with it. There's not a bunch of debris in it. And so I don't really recommend putting a converter in a bone stock, like high mileage E4OD. I would more or less say probably wait until the transmission fails, or if you just want to be preemptive and buy a good transmission, upgrade it when that time comes. As for the accumulator body, like when I say upgrade, I mean like purchase a transmission that's built and ready to go. When it comes to the accumulator body, a lot of people upgrade the accumulator body or recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's needed. Like one of the problems can be that like the 2-3 shift valve may stick. And so if that happens, and you need to get a replacement valve body, then sure, it's not a bad idea to get one that's going to shift a little bit firmer. But the main thing that's important is changing the accumulator body, which is what most people are talking about when they say the valve body in these transmissions. Changing the accumulator body doesn't necessarily do a lot more than we can do in tuning. At least not to the extent that I would worry about it, again, on a stock high mileage truck. So again, if you have a valve body issue, an accumulator body issue, and need to replace it, sure, get an upgraded one. Get something that's going to shift firmer. But again, that's all that's doing. It's making the shift happen more quickly. It's going to be a firmer shift. It's not changing like your overall line pressure or holding pressure on your clutches. So it's not just like a fix-all for these transmissions. If you're going to replace the transmission, replace the converter, it's not a bad idea at that point to get a better flex plate than stock, because they are prone to cracking. And again, it goes back to when you get a transmission, get a great transmission for the power level you're making. And you kind of have to take that recommendation from whoever you choose for your builder to be. The other thing I think I want to cover, I mean, the main components are here, right? We have a turbo, we have a fuel system, we have injectors, we have up pipes. We talked about the turbo pedestal. That's going to be important. The other stuff we need to do is add an intercooler. And normal driving, like if you're just cruising on the highway, cruising around town or whatever, intercooler isn't going to make like a load of difference. It's not going to make a huge difference. What matters is like the more you put the truck under load and under high boost scenarios when your air is going to be a lot hotter, it's going to be less dense. And the point of the intercooler is to get more air density into the engine. It's very important. There's a lot of ways you can go about intercooling these trucks. Like I mentioned, you can get like a Banks kit, CX Racing. You can take a look at those. CX Racing here, sorry about not swapping that over, makes an intercooler kit that's okay. Like it's not the nicest thing ever, but it works. They're out of stock like everything these days. The piping kit's kind of not great. The boots aren't that great. The intercooler's okay. Like if you need a somewhat cheap kit and you don't want to put together yourself, then this is an okay way to go. I don't love them. What I would do is get this is a great option for getting a great intercooler kit that's under $1,000. Carson Stouffer Diesel, so CSD Performance, makes an OBS intercooler piping kit that comes with everything you need. It is the piping, the boots and clamps, the spider, everything besides the intercooler that will mount to a stock turbo or a drop-in turbo. It's less than $400. It's a great way to go. $384 right there. And then for the intercooler itself, you're just going to want to use a stock Super Duty replacement intercooler. There's a ton of intercoolers out there. You can spend like $300 to like probably more than $1,500. For an average build like this, you're probably not going to see enough benefit that it's worth the money to buy a $1,000 intercooler or a $1,500 intercooler. I don't have enough data to say like what the truth is to that. Like like what benefits there are in what situations. Like definitely like Banks intercoolers are going to be better than a stock intercooler. Just enough better to justify the cost? I don't think so. That's up to you, and you can certainly do your research on that. But either way, we're going to look for a Super Duty stock replacement intercooler, and a great intercooler for that is a CSF 6017. These are $300 or thereabouts. Of course, this could change. They're an all aluminum stock replacement. They work fantastic. We've never seen them crack or have any issues like that. Very good price. Like for what they are, they're a really good price and a great intercooler. I really, really like them. I'm going to go ahead and add it here. And so that's adding to our tally. But you can get a junkyard one if you want to. Probably don't recommend that. Or pick a fancier one if that's what you prefer. And then you can either build your own brackets to mount the intercooler, or you can get one from somewhere like OBS Solutions that has a great bracket kit for mounting a Super Duty intercooler that's $220. So this really isn't a terrible way to go. I highly recommend it if you want to spend a little bit more money. They have a great bracket kit. We're going to be working with them. We should have these available on our website pretty soon also. But this is a fantastic way to go. So as of right now, altogether, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,500, $5,600 once you add the brackets and the intercooler piping kit. Of course, it's a live stream, so I probably am missing something glaringly obvious, but this is the basics of it. And I guess the other things I sort of forget because everybody always has them. You're going to want an air intake of some kind. I really like S&B filters. I'm really, really happy with them. There's tons of air intake kits like AFEs, S&Bs. You can use a 6637, just like a Donaldson filter, if you want to, and just like kind of make your own air intake kit. That's up to you, but you will want one of some kind. I like S&Bs a lot, so I tend to want to stick that way. But some things when it comes to towing outside of just like choosing the performance parts and the things you want to do to make the most amount of usable power you can have. Let me switch this back over here. Is going to be like your tire size and gear ratio. Those are going to be very important. If you want to run larger tires, so if you want to do something like a 35 or 37, just don't. If your intention is towing heavy, like the truck is, you can never compensate for the leverage from those tires with a gear ratio. Now, if you decide you're going to put 35s or 37s on the truck, then definitely regear it. But I really don't recommend it. Like stock to like maybe like 33-inch tires is all I would recommend doing if your goal is the best like drivable experience. And a lot of that is partly because we only have 4-speed transmission, and from a mechanical standpoint, we can't leverage the converter to do the work of another gear, which is kind of how it's perceived that like in tuning we should do. Like we should try to use the converter like a gear. That's not what it's made for. So don't run anything larger than 33s. Stay close to stock in that realm. And then like RPM wise, for choosing gears, what I typically would say is like, if you want to tow an overdrive, then pick a gear ratio. If you need to regear, pick a gear ratio that whatever speed you spend most of your time towing at. So if that's 65 or whatever, try to have it so like in overdrive or third, whatever gear you pick you want to tow in, that RPMs are going to be somewhere around like over like 2200. That's going to be like the most efficient the truck can be in like easy passing power without downshifting. It'll stay on top of a turbo, especially in a responsive setup like this. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's most of what would go into this kind of build. Let me check something else here. All right, I'll grab a couple questions. Diehard Diesel, yeah. If you want to convert to a 6.7, just buy a 6.7. Like, that would be a lot of work. That'd be a lot of work to convert to a 6.7. It would be cool. I mean, a 6.7 and an OBS body would be neat. I guess one other thing I didn't mention is cooling, like for the transmission. If you have temperature issues, then you'd want to stick a better transmission cooler in it. That's really what it comes down to. Like, you want the transmission to be warm when you're working the truck, but like if you aren't towing a lot and the transmission doesn't get hot, it doesn't get over like 200 degrees, or you stay very cool all the time, there's no need to put a larger transmission cooler in it. It's not going to benefit you any. But if it does get hot, then a 6-liter style transmission cooler, or just a larger cooler, there's again tons of options for that, would be needed to keep it cool. From Austin, what about a plastic Super Duty intercooler for this power rating? You can use one. It would work fine. More than likely, you're not going to have issues like blowing the end caps off. I guess if it's something you had laying around, it wouldn't be a bad idea, but I don't know that I would choose that on purpose when there's other options like CSFs that are pretty cheap and all aluminum. Let me look back one more time, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we're good. Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. If you guys have other questions, feel free to just drop them in the comments later. I may go ahead and kind of cut up this video and turn it into a better video later. It's kind of hard, like trying to, like I said, plan for all the perspectives that someone might have and like the reason they would ask these questions. It can be a little difficult, but, and that's where like, I guess just going ahead and live streaming, I'm like, if there's mistakes, we can talk about it. If any of you have done builds on your 7.3, like towing builds, stuff you didn't like or did like, feel free to shoot us an email, media@1023diesel.com. So media@1023diesel.com. And we can certainly add on there, maybe have a conversation, or we can add your information and get back to you with more questions or more answers to your questions. Sorry. All right, guys, it's been fun. I'm going to go home. If you appreciate the live stream style, I will keep doing it when I can. If you don't, then we might anyway. Probably next week I'll try to do another live stream, and we'll do it on a Super Duty towing build, and then maybe over the next couple months we'll try to do more builds on like higher horsepower and like the reason you would want them. I appreciate you guys watching.